Hey guys, hope you're well. So this is a video for any Muslims who are having doubts about Islam. I'm guessing it's going to be based on one or two reasons. I'm going to try to appeal to one or two reasons. One of the reasons is because is not congruent. Current understanding of Islam is not congruent with science. And the second one, your understanding of Islam is not congruent with maybe ethical questions you have, the theology of Islam, or some of the ethical framework of Islam, such as certain things you can do and can't do, how you can treat others, or the political framework, such as the death penalty for leaving the religion, death penalty for homosexuality, etc., and the endorsement of slavery, are troubling you. That's what I'm going to guess. Okay, so I'm going to work on that. Okay, so the first one I'm going to go into is science. Is one of the problems with Islam is that, regarding theory of evolution at least, is it holds the story of Genesis as literally true. That there was Adam and there was Eve and etc. And so that is not congruent with the theory of evolution. So the alternative is to view it as an allegory. It's just to have it as there's some kind of symbolism within the story regarding mankind's spiritual development or growth, or some underlying message behind it. There is somebody called Emmanuel Swedenborg, and I'll probably come back to him later in the video, who was a Christian mystic theologian who, before you get going, not trying to convert you to Christianity, I'm just saying I think he had an incredibly insightful theology which can be applied to any religion. And he's not alone in that. Hindu gurus and teachers do treat their holy texts, like the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, etc., as allegories, and do derive messages from that. So he's not the only person who does it, but he does it with the Bible. The same can be done with the Quran. So you can view Genesis as just an allegory. And Emmanuel Swedenborg has the Christian account of Genesis, or the found in the Torah too, the account of Genesis, and he uncovers that the stories found contained within Genesis as an allegory for man's development. So you can look at that and apply it to Islam. So you don't necessarily need to take it seriously. So seriously, I mean literally. So you can still be a Muslim and believe in the theory of evolution. There is a Muslim imam called Osama Hassan who does believe in the theory of evolution and treats Genesis as an allegory. So you're not alone in that regard. So you can still believe, just try to treat it as an allegory. Okay, so that's regarding science. Okay, and there's other things as well that are incongruent with science within the Quran, such as light angels and things like this. You don't necessarily need to believe it's literally the same as light here, or you don't necessarily need to believe everything within the Quran is literal. You can take the Quran largely as a collection of allegories. You can take the Quran as symbolism. Like I said, Emmanuel Swedenborg does that for the Bible, and Hindu teachers do that for their various holy texts within Hinduism. You don't need to take the Quran literally. There is a tradition within the religion called esoteric exegesis, mainly done by the Sufis, who try to look for the symbolism, or try to look for the spiritual lessons or guidance that can be derived from not taking the story literally. Like Joseph Campbell talks about the power of myth, that myths can be very violent and vivid and fantastic, but the language and the metaphors and the structure of the myth gives life to certain ethical frameworks, gives life to certain guidance, it awakens something within us in a way that just writing things in a very dry language, such as do this, don't do this, this is perhaps something you can apply to your life. The story itself awakens something within us. It's a fusion between information and like an entertainment, in the sense, or not entertainment. It can be actually sacred. There's a sacredness of myths that seems to speak to our intellect and our hearts. So if you take the Quran in that regard and just treat it as an allegory, it can be very beneficial for you. So you don't need to take it literally. So if you find something that does contradict science, scientific theories, just try to view as the Quran as an allegory. Perhaps that will rest your heart. Okay. So the next one I'm going to go into is the theology and the ethics of the religion, because a lot of people find that quite challenging. I'm going to give a model of God. Going to be so arrogant as to do that, and I'm also going to give a model of spiritual growth. And if you're somebody who still you're having doubts about Islam, but you still believe in God, you're having doubts about Islam, but you still believe there's some kind of you still believe in spirituality, you still want to grow spiritually, and you see almost Islam as shackles or a framework that may be holding you back, I'm just going to present something that might be interesting to you, and I'm going to tell you where I got this. I derived it, but I'm also going to tell you other places where you can find it. If you look at universalist paths like Hinduism or near-death experiences, if you look at the commonalities in near-death experiences and research into the commonalities in near-death experiences, if you look at the writings of Emmanuel Swedenborg, who was a Christian universalist, if you look into these things, what they all say God is, God's one of the, they say God is unfathomable, right? God is beyond our capability of understanding. But one of the core characteristics of God is love. And what I mean by love is to try to awaken an awareness within you is, if you think of parental love, if you think of platonic love, if you think of romantic love, if you think of love between siblings, if you think of love for things, or love for experiences and sensations and things like this, if you think of appreciation, if you think of kindness, if you think of generosity, if you think of compassion, if you think of forgiveness, think of the energy, the sentiment, the experience that unites all of those things I've just mentioned. That's love. Everything that unites that, because those are different, you could call them, I would call them different manifestations of love. And if you think of what unites all those things, if you just sit down and think of each of those loves, there's a commonality, there's something that unites all those things and even transcends all those things. So that's love, and that's what I call it divine love. You know, if you get in touch with that, I think it's probably quite profound. And when you're walking down the street, this is something I got from a near-death experience called Rhonda Bynes, I think her name is. You know, if you focus on people, couples being together, a person walking with their kid and smiling with their child and laughing. If you think of if you look at relationship, people laughing together, hopefully not about something malicious, but if you look at people laughing together, those are expressions of love. And so, and if you think of the universe, right? This is from Ilia Diallo, who talks of the theology of Pierre Teilhard, who's a Franciscan monk. He says that what underlies existence, love is a cosmic force. You think of what love is attraction, what underlies everything. Physics can call it different names, come up with different theories of what it is, but he says underlies it is love. That's what love is, attraction, and the synthesis of things. When things come together, they give birth to something else. So if you think of two people having sex, and then they give birth to perhaps a child, or even something else, it can develop love. It can develop something that even transcends the both of them. They become one, right? Or create something new. But anyway, I get a bit too off topic. So if you want to think of what underlies existence, and you think that's love, that's divine love. So that's a core characteristic of God, right? Okay, so on to what spiritual growth is. Well, spiritual growth this is something I got from, you can find this in Hinduism, in the Bhagavad Gita, things like this. And Emmanuel Swedenborg talks about this, and near-death experiences, the commonalities talk about this, is how you connect with God is the same way you would connect with somebody else. Is how you connect with God is by sharing experiences, or someone else will be sharing experiences, or like Emmanuel Swedenborg illustrates by analogy, is how you connect with somebody else. Say if you've never met somebody else, you go to on the other side of the world, but you both share a real passion for learning the guitar, or you both share a real passion for a movie or a particular genre of music. There's a connection right there straight away, because you value something, because you value strongly something they value strongly, and there's like there's like some kind of emotional resonance there. In the same way of God, one of God's core characteristics of love, what spiritual growth is learning to align your intention, your thoughts, your character to embody love. And the more you do that, the more you remove the things that get in the way of love, such as ungratefulness, such as holding on to grievances, desires for revenge, such as desire to manipulate and dominate other human beings, psychologically, physically, sexually. Once you let go of these things, and trauma too, trauma's a big one, or self-hate can be a big one too. Once you let go of these things, all these things that stand in the way of awakening this love that is already in you, that God put in you, that divine spark, right? Once you remove these barriers, or once you lessen that, once you disidentify with these things and say, those things are not me. No, they're not me, they're something else. You can call them foreign energies, some people call them spirits. You can just say they're just conditioning. They're not you. That's not who you really are. Your unconditioned self, your divine spark within you is love, right? That's what it is. Love begat love, like God, right? Okay, so that's who you really are. So what you're trying to do is just get rid of the stuff, get rid of the darkness, clean off your spirit, so that love can radiate through, and you can be loving in general to everyone, to yourself, to people, to God, right? That's what spiritual growth is. So if you take those two frameworks of spiritual growth, that might be what is underlying your frustration with Islam, is that you're seeing almost as an impediment to God, because the framework that you may have the framework of God that you may have an understanding is a God who might be quite angry, or a God who may be quite hateful, or God who is about vengeance. God wants revenge and that kind of thing. A kind of almost like God is a parent, like God. The God of Islam, or mainstream Islam in a sense, or even mainstream Abrahamic religion, is almost like a parent. He watches over us, loves us, punishes, rewards us when we're good, and punishes us when we're bad. The God of Hinduism, the God of Universalism, the God of near-death experiences, the God of Emmanuel Swedenborg, doesn't punish. There are sort of things in place. It's almost like they're just frameworks in place where there is such thing as hell in these regards, but hell is something you go to by your own accord. If you foster a desire for revenge, if you foster a desire for manipulation and domination and control of others, if you foster too much lust, excessive lust, if you foster coveting, wanting to possess and control things that are other people, these kind of characteristics, if that becomes who you are, you develop a real love for that you develop a real attachment, that becomes like a core of who you are, then when you die, you're around other people like that. So imagine being around a bunch of people who are like that, call that hell, right? But if you foster love in your life and loving relationships, when you die, you're around other people who fostered love, and you're around and you have loving relationships with them, which is, you can call that heaven, right? So what I'm saying is that the framework you may understand in Islam, it may be very, very different, such as a God that sends people to be tortured mercilessly for eternity for perhaps not being convinced of something rationally, such as the doctrine of Islam, or making minor transgressions within their life. In other traditions, like I said, Hinduism, Universalism, the theology of Emmanuel Swedenborg, near-death experiences, hell is not eternal. Hell is something people can get out of if they reflect and or call upon the divine, or even reflect upon themselves and just try to better themselves as human beings. They can, or spirits, even when they die, you can still better yourself. You can still turn towards the light that's within you. So it's something you can get out of. So I think that may be a different spirituality. It might be a spirituality that appeals to you. So what I'm saying is that you can still be a Muslim, but what you might need to do in order to remain a Muslim and still feel that it's bringing you towards a kind of love-based perspective that I'm giving you, is you might need to strip away some of the tradition. And a good way of doing that rationally may be to watch the documentary by Tom Holland called Islam: An Untold Story, and he argues that stories of Muhammad or Islam really didn't become prominent until about 2 years after Muhammad's alleged death. So what that can say is that the hadith, or the structure of the religion that's been built up, is not necessarily exactly how Muhammad was or said. It can be built up by the dominant people of the time, or the elite of the time. The patriarchal Arab culture of the time influenced people to interpret religion in a certain way. So that's why you can have things such as, there's a very, in my opinion, within the traditional understanding of Islam, there's a strain of dominance, a desire to dominate other human beings, to try to control people's thought process. And by doing that, and what I mean by that is, if you say to somebody, you're going to be tortured mercilessly for eternity if you ever leave the religion or question it, or don't become a Muslim, or you're going to, and if you try to leave the religion, you'll be killed. That's a way of trying to almost control somebody's psychology, because you're trying to instill so much fear in them that they even fear questioning or doubting. Whereas I think God allows space for us to question and doubt. And one of the things I think is so merciful about God is God allows people to draw closer to God, to Him, her, it. God allows people to draw closer, even if they don't believe in a concept. That just being loving, just being kind, aligning your character, your intentions, and your thoughts with love, you're drawing closer to God, even if you don't name God or even have a concept of God or even believe in the concept of God. I think that's how merciful God can be. There are atheists in near-death experiences who've gone to heaven, who have had heavenly experiences, and because it seems like it can be mercy, or it can just be they were generally decent human beings. And I think that's a big mercy, because someone just might not be rationally convinced of the existence of God. And I'm a theist, but a lot of the rational arguments people present of God, I think, are deeply flawed. I used to be an atheist, and I could find holes in the arguments, and I still can, even though I still believe it's not based in that. It's not based on those arguments. I think those arguments pretty much appeal to, well, not all the time, but oftentimes appeal to people who already have a pre-existing belief in God and want some kind of rational framework to assuage to appeal to their intellect. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because I think we need to have something that appeals to our intellect as well as our hearts or intuition. So basically, what I'm saying by this, if you're having doubts about the religion, I'd advise you to just perhaps look into Universalists, look into other religions, look into Hinduism, look into the Theology of Emmanuel, Swedenborg, look into near-death experiences, and then try to see, does the interpretation of Islam that you have match up with this message? Or what is the perspective of God or religion or the spiritual path that you're following within Islam? Where's the difference? And the difference is probably where you're having problems. If God was basically the quality, even if you don't believe literally, but if you believe there's a quality that can be called God, or of love, of goodness, you don't believe Islam really embodies that. You don't believe the model of God presented in Islam is a reflection of that, and you don't believe the spiritual framework and the model of spiritual growth within Islam reflects an aim towards that, or an embodiment of those qualities either. So that might be one of the reasons why you're having such doubt on a spiritual level and on an ethical level regarding Islam, because you see things like slavery, death penalty for apostasy, as I've already said, the caliphate and dhimmi status for non-Muslims, the second classes, and citizenship status. And you might see these things, think, how is that love? How is that goodwill? How is that kindness? Okay, so that might be the reason why. And so what I'm inviting you to do is, you might choose to leave the religion, or you might choose to reform the religion and to what you might think is a true path. Because in my opinion, if you look at if you take some of the actions, if you look at some of the hadith and some of the examples of Muhammad and some of the saying things within the Quran, especially if you take them allegorically, I think there's a lot of beauty, and I think there's a lot of spirituality, a lot of beautiful spirituality within it. On the other hand, some of the aspects, if you take some of the aspects of the Quran literally, and especially some of the hadith, some of the things that Muhammad purportedly said and did, I think are horrific. Like some of the tortures and things like this, and some of the justification for slavery and raping slaves and things like this. But it's almost, I'm skeptical that those two mindsets that you find can coexist within a human being, unless they generally have multiple personality disorder, but or whatever it's called now. And so I'm skeptical that the two things, because you'd find in terms of God and in terms of spiritual growth, what I've just found, you'll find examples of Muhammad's life where it's almost profoundly in alignment with love, but almost profoundly in advising people of loving things, forgiveness, compassion, gratefulness, reliance on God, etc., these kind of things. But then you'll find almost anger and narcissism within narcissistic behavior and destructive behavior and domineering behavior within Muhammad. So it's almost like either he did have multiple personality disorder, or maybe other people have imposed some of their perspectives or spirituality onto the religion, as I would argue and other people would argue is done with Christianity and Jesus, is that you have people like the Council of Nicaea or the Catholic Church and people like that who are almost imposing other outside frameworks or their own cultural narratives on top of the message of Jesus, etc. And this can be true in all religions, right? You can do that with Hinduism too, you can do that with Judaism, you can do that with Buddhism, etc. You could argue that too, that perhaps the core message is being lost in translation or narration, or from being handed down from the elite, because that's how traditionally all religions have been, because the majority of human beings could not read or write up until the advent of the printing press, which I think was either the 17th or 18th century is invented. So most people scholars were normally people who read and write. So the scholars were the ones who were transmitting and shaping a religion. So imagine if that's the case. You can imagine it was literally a handful of people who were shaping the religion. A handful of people who were shaping the religion. So think about that. So it's coming up 20 minutes, and I've sort of rambled a bit, I think, but hopefully if you're having doubts, what I'm trying to say is, hopefully I've given you a different perspective of looking at your own religion. And I want to first of all say I'm not a Muslim, and I also want to say I do actually criticize traditional Islam, the exclusivist message within Islam, because I think the exclusive message of that, this is the only path to truth, this is the only path to God, and if you don't follow this path, you're going to be tortured mercilessly for all eternity. I think it breeds almost a narcissistic mindset, a destructive mindset, a domineering mindset, an in-group versus out-group. Our group was saved, yours is not. You need to get on our path, that kind of mindset where you value Muslims, and the same can be true for Christians who are exclusivists too. You value Christians and Muslims more than everybody else. You don't see everybody as equal, and the only reason why almost you can be kind to people is you want them to join your religion, not because you just love them, right? So I'm not saying all Muslims are like that, all Christians are like that. I'm just saying that's the kind of mindset I've found that exclusivist positions can foster. So what I'm inviting you to do is not necessarily to leave the religion, but to reinterpret the religion. So yeah, okay guys, so take care. Oh, and I'll post links in the description box to some videos and websites which I think will help you if you're having doubts about Islam. Okay, so take care.